Hello, my name's Chris Froud. I'm a UK and European patent attorney, and I work for Withers & Rogers, who are one of the larger firms of European patent attorneys, based in both the UK and in France and Germany as well. And today I'm going to be talking to you about artificial intelligence inventions, and in particular whether you might be able to obtain patent protection for them, so that you can understand, if you see a potential artificial intelligence invention, whether there might be some way to protect it under the patent system. I want to start with a brief recap of what we consider to be artificial intelligence. So in a traditional computer program, contains certain fixed rules, mainly which are formulated in advance by a programmer, and they are designed to process a particular set of data in a particular pre-designed way to generate a specific output. Artificial intelligence, in contrast, describes a family of algorithms that try to mimic human intelligence, learning, reasoning, self-correction. In traditional rule-based machine learning, such as expert systems, well, these are quite similar to traditional programming, and they seek to mimic human decision-making processes by describing rules for handling particular scenarios the machine is likely to encounter. So there might be a sort of series of if-then rules. So an example of this might be a traditional use of a rule-based expert system is a sort of medical expert system, which would use knowledge about particular diseases and facts about the patient to suggest a diagnosis. So if a certain set of symptoms were observed in a patient and certain test results had been identified, then a particular disease would be likely and would be diagnosed by the system. And this mimics the way a doctor diagnoses a patient. More recently, a much more advanced form of artificial intelligence has become much more popular, and this is the so-called machine learning, which is a modern subset of artificial intelligence that's attracting particular attention in recent years. In machine learning, the aim is to develop algorithms which enable machines to learn without being explicitly programmed by a human being. So you don't need rules, but the machine can actually generalize from examples that they are shown to develop their own rules over time effectively. The machine learning algorithms, so they're not hardwired like a traditional computer program. They can improve through experience, being molded by the data that you feed into the machine learning algorithm. So the machine learning algorithm effectively builds its own model based on the sample data that it's shown in order to make predictions without being explicitly programmed to make them. And the machine learning algorithm constantly assesses its own performance against some kind of metric. And there's a feedback cycle so that it can do a better job next time. Now, email spam filtering is a good example of machine learning. A human can classify emails as being wanted emails or unwanted spam emails, training the machine learning algorithm to recognize spam emails, maybe based on their content, so that the machine learning algorithm can, over time, make predictions over whether future emails are wanted or spam. And classification errors that might happen get corrected by the human being, which is then used as a feedback into the machine learning algorithm to help it improve the quality of its predictions over time. So eventually, the machine learning algorithm gets so good that it only ever classifies spam emails as spam and doesn't accidentally classify emails that you want and put them in the spam folder. So why now? Why has AI and in particular machine learning become such a hot topic at the moment? If we look at the patent filings alone, these have increased greatly in recent years. There were over 30,000 AI-related patents published in 2017, which is an increase of some 400% over 10 years earlier in 2007. So it's a massive increase, and I think the reasons are twofold. Firstly, processors have become smaller and cheaper, and increasingly high-level computing power is available that's also portable and particularly battery-powered as well. And this has greatly benefited AI computing. In particular, cheap graphical processing units, the sort of things that were designed to display 3D rendered images in computer games, have proven to be a perfect processor platform on which to run AI systems, because they're ideal for doing the kind of complicated matrix calculations that are involved. And then on the other side, in order to train your machine learning algorithm to recognize certain scenarios, for example, to train your spam filter to recognize spam, you need a big pile of data. You need a big pile of spam emails, or you need a large amount of training data in order to feed those into your algorithm to allow it to learn. And big data has become big business as well. And I suppose also these two things are related too, because not only has big data has been generated by the fact that you've also got increasingly cheap processing power feeding the big data machine as well. So cheap processors are being integrated into everyday objects. Whole systems can be integrated on a chip, complete with networking capabilities. So you're seeing more and more sort of Internet of Things devices, at home and at work, which have sensors in them, and these sensors can report back data, and all this large collection of data can be fed into AI systems in order to train them. So I think we've reached a point where these technologies have collided together. And there's some synergy between them that's really making AI popular, and also maybe meaning that AI is really the only way that you can actually make sense of all this big data, because there's just too much for any human being to sit down and try and chew their way through it. Are artificial intelligence inventions patentable? Well, the short answer is yes. Patent offices, for example, the European Patent Office, treat them really like any other invention involving computer software or a mathematical algorithm. They don't treat them any differently, which is good, because it means we understand what kind of things we'll be able to get a patent for. And although we're still in the early days of artificial intelligence inventions, we've also seen a certain number of these have been processed through the European Patent Office and other patent offices. So we're starting to get a flavour for what is and isn't allowable. And that's what I want to talk you through in the next section, because there are some nuances and subtleties that we need to appreciate that are specific to artificial intelligence patents. So we take a step back and just remind ourselves of what the criteria for getting a patent are. There's these 5-step tests, effectively. Is it novel? Does it involve something new that's not been disclosed to the public before the filing date of the patent? Is it inventive? Is it a non-trivial extension of an existing idea? Is it sufficiently disclosed? Are we willing and able to tell the public enough about how it works so that they could go and make one themselves? Is it industrially applicable? So does it work? Does it avoid breaking the laws of physics? That's normally a pretty low hurdle. And the most important one for us that's highlighted at the bottom there is it not excluded? So there are certain statutory exclusions. There are certain things that you can't get a patent for that are excluded from patentability. And the relevant ones for artificial intelligence and machine learning are mathematical algorithms and computer programs. Since artificial intelligence machine learning inventions will often be implemented as mathematical algorithms running on a computer, does that mean that artificial intelligence and machine learning are not patentable? Fortunately not. These hurdles can be overcome quite easily for inventions that solve real-world technical problems. So a computer program running the engine management system in a car, which helps the car to run more efficiently, is inherently patentable. And likewise, any mathematical algorithm can be tied to the solution of a real-world technical problem. For example, making an algorithm for calculating appropriate parameters in the engine management system patentable. And the same applies to artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms, such that the artificial intelligence mathematical models and algorithms in the abstract might not be patentable, but by tying them to the solution of a real-world technical problem, they are likely to sort of tip them over the edge so that they become patentable. So a neural network might not be patentable in the abstract, but training it to carry out a particular task that solves a real-world technical problem could make it patentable, for example. Additionally, the design and adaptation of particular artificial intelligence algorithms so that they can run on particular hardware, that should be patentable as well. For example, it's likely that the adaptations required to implement a neural network on a graphical processing unit or some other kind of distributed and parallel processing hardware should also be patentable as well. Next, I want to go through a couple of case studies to give you an idea of the sorts of things that are and are not patentable. These case studies come from real cases at the European Patent Office to give you a flavour of what they will allow and what they won't allow. In this first case study, there was a patent application for classifying text documents based on their contents. So looking at the contents of the document to decide whether it's maybe a novel or whether it's a technical document. So the sort of thing that a human would have to read through and understand what the context of the document was. They trained a classification algorithm to work that out themselves. And this was actually rejected by the European Patent Office because they didn't consider that classifying documents according to their content was a technical problem, but rather was a linguistic problem. This is quite interesting because there's plenty of other examples of classification systems that have been allowed. So it's not that classification systems themselves are not patentable, but more it depends again on what kind of problem the classifier is solving. So if the problem appears to be one that's more technical, one that you might say more involved in the realms of science and engineering and less involved in the arts, then the European Patent Office are likely to be viewing them favourably and giving a patent for them. So the classification of images, videos, audio or speech signals based on some low-level features such as edges and pixel attributes, and training classifiers to recognize features in that data, that's is eminently patentable. And examples might be detecting people in an image, separating speech from audio, separating it from background noise, converting speech to text. All of these should be patentable. In the next example, we had a patent application which claimed a method of using a neural network to detect irregular heartbeats. Now, while the neural network is itself an abstract mathematical model, once you claim a neural network for this technical task of identifying irregular heartbeats, it's suddenly seen as having an elevated technical purpose, and that makes it patentable. So this was allowed. In the next example, we had a patent application with a claim that was directed towards a method of modelling some reservoir properties using a support vector machine. Now, support vector machines are also abstract mathematical concepts, but when they're applied to this technical task of predicting oil reservoir properties, then again this elevates the claim to something that's seen as being patentable and more than just an abstract mathematical model. So again, this patent application was allowed. In this last case study, I want to think about artificial intelligence in healthcare, which is quite relevant at the moment with the COVID-19 outbreak, where we're seeing artificial intelligence systems being used to help manage this outbreak. Healthcare has become a real focus of activity for artificial intelligence in the search for new treatments and to assist in diagnosing patients. And it's interesting, at least from the perspective of the European patent law, because not only are there the issues we've already discussed about avoiding computer-related exclusions and mathematical method exclusions, there's also some extra hurdles we have to jump where there are exclusions against methods of treatment and diagnosis performed on a human body. In terms of the computer-related and mathematical method exclusions, we've already discussed ways in which we can overcome those by showing that the invention provides a non-obvious technical solution to a real-world technical problem. And in fact, the EPO have confirmed that providing a medical diagnosis using an artificial intelligence system by processing physiological measurements is patentable. And we've seen examples of deep neural networks used for detecting fractures from X-ray images, and reinforcement learning algorithms being used to identify sepsis treatments that maximise the chances of survival. We have another hurdle to jump at the EPO, which is Article 53 of the European Patent Convention. Now this says that you're not allowed to get patents for methods of treating the human or animal body by surgery or therapy and diagnostic methods that are practiced on the human or animal body. These are excluded regardless of whether or not you're solving a real-world technical problem or not. This is an extra hurdle that we have to leap over. Does this prevent us from patenting the use of artificial intelligence in diagnosing patients? Well, probably not. Fortunately, careful claim drafting usually means that these exclusions can be avoided. For example, it's not often possible just to claim one aspect of the diagnosis process to avoid the exclusions. For example, just claiming a data acquisition or data processing step that could be used as part of the overall diagnosis method, and that would fall outside the exclusions. Another interesting issue that's getting some attention is whether AI can be an inventor. And if so, who owns the resulting IP? What happens if an AI system can invent all by itself? There's a requirement in all patent laws around the world that we have to name the inventors on a patent application. Inventorship is an important concept. For example, it defines patent ownership. The inventor is the first owner unless they're obliged to transfer their rights to another party. For example, because they're an employee, they have to transfer it to their employer. But what happens if what happens if the concepts in the patent application were invented by a machine? There's been some test cases in the UK, the US and the EPO where some academics have named an AI system called DABUS as the inventor. Now, they said that DABUS only received some general training in the fields of science and engineering and wasn't created to solve any particular problems, i.e. they weren't being used as a tool by a human inventor. They were arguing that actually DABUS was an inventor themselves. And DABUS came up with a couple of different solutions which they then filed patent applications for. And given the argument that the inventor is the person who devised the invention, the creators of DABUS argued that DABUS himself should be an inventor. Now, the UK IPO, the EPO and the US Patent Office have all confirmed that AI systems cannot be an inventor, and the inventor must be a human being. An AI system should not be named as an inventor. The patent system views the AI system as a tool used by a human inventor. So it seems the human inventor of the AI system in question should be named as the inventor. The patent system isn't ready with the concept that the AI system itself could invent something. In conclusion, artificial intelligence and machine learning patents are treated like any other computer software invention, and they can be patentable where they provide a non-obvious technical solution to a technical problem. Care is required when patent drafting to avoid all of the pitfalls that we've discussed. So I'd recommend that you seek the advice of a patent attorney who's experienced in computer software inventions, and of course we'd be very happy to help any of you at any time. Thank you very much for your attention.